against the context of a couple of days in Glencoe with the team, we have some reflections to share, and let's play another game of ping pong, Johnny. The people like like it at ping pong.
We could ping pong a little bit of kind of open reflection because we have debriefed, we have had chats about it. Maybe just
we haven't gone point by point, have we?
Point by point, and just kind of. I think rather than ping pong, let's take it almost stage by stage and then summarize the whole thing because there's so many moving parts. We've got to consider you are moving for that 250 kilometers. You're moving over different terrain.
I hope to be. Yes.
We're moving over different kinds of terrain through different kinds of logistical challenge, just as a runner, through different environments in terms of at one point you're through the canals, at one point you're on harder ground, sometimes you're going through a very technical trail, etc., etc. We'll get to all that, I think, and through night and day and day and night. So many things to work out. And then over and above that, we then have to work out how we get to you and keep you safe, keep you alive, and keep looking at you. That, as an encapsulating kind of idea of what we've got to do, then unfolded. And I'll let you take the baton, take the ping from my pong here, at the point at which we got to Glencoe, last week in real time, a few weeks back, probably when this comes out, and started our actual recce. Everything else to this point had been done on experience with that environment through previous thing. You've run a reasonable amount of the West Highland Way before. I've walked it a couple of times. We've got a lot of experience in the mountains surrounding that area, so we know the roads. But, and what was the first but for you, do you think?
I could fail.
Mm-hmm.
It's the big one. The big one. I'm not going to waffle on this one. It's a long way.
Yeah.
There's a lot that can happen between now and then. There's a lot of variables at play. There's a lot of mental fortitude required. There's a lot of sleep deprivation required. And essentially, it's intimidating and scary and thus exciting to me because I could fail. So that is the first reflection on a couple of days of trying to get to grips with the area. And I don't feel any more or less confident. I could probably feel more confident I'm not going to fail, in fact.
I was going to ask you, yeah.
But at the end of the day, it would be, I'm not gonna fall into this. If you can even open the door to you saying you're going to fail, then you're not. All this bullshit. No, I mean, yeah, you can have an unwavering faith in yourself, but you need to be realistic and accept that
we've talked to failure. You will fail. You will fail about something I've discussed just recently, off the podcast, about 100 times during it.
Yeah,
you'll tell yourself, forget this, I'm going to give up, I can't do this and all this kind of stuff, and then you'll talk yourself around, and these are the kind of challenges that you'll get to. But interesting question for me, I don't think I've directly asked, is that before the recce, we had, like I said, sort of introducing this, we had a kind of a conceptual understanding. Obviously, we've both done long ultras, we've done long events that challenged our minds, challenged our bodies before. This one for you is the longest distance you've been, and certainly the longest continuous movement that you've looked at so far by quite some margin, actually. Was there a difference from the recce itself, the idea of the recce, us saying we're going to go up here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and really dig in and look at the ground? Was there a difference before that and then after that, having had your feet on the ground and done, what did we cover distance-wise over the course of about 80k?
No, over the 2 days, about 55. 55, 60, yeah.
So having done that, having got that 55, 60 on specifically picked out parts of the route, do you now think, there's more confidence there, or do you think it just underlined the confidence you already had, or has it changed your perspective? What's that done for you?
It's not really changed anything other than it's made me look at the conceptual challenges in my head in a more realistic framework, I guess. Yeah. Whereby a lot of the things that I was fearful of but could logic my way out of fear on, those are more reinforced now that I've gone through that process. So the undulations that I knew were going to come on certain sections, I've now felt them and experienced them, so I can kind of tap into that understanding ahead of time. I kind of know that, when the whole day is devoted to covering a long distance, if you're not moving at that demanding a pace and you don't need to worry about getting back to your laptop urgently, then it's actually a little bit more mentally tolerable. Because recently, for 3, 4, 5 hour sessions, I've kind of been working most Saturday evenings, most Sundays recently. So there's always been this nagging voice in the back of my head that says, "Oh, 2 hours will do, 3 hours will do, so you can get back and do this."
Yeah, so
whereas because the time was, well, I was actually pleasantly surprised with how smooth and easy everything felt, and how much I enjoyed being out in the environment. A lot of it's probably down to the environment, the fact it was quote unquote new or unfamiliar, whereas all of my training recently has been bashing the same areas because of convenience, which has made me feel a little bit less connected to the training process than I ordinarily would be. So I think I'm more confident in the conceptual understanding of what's to come, but I'm no less aware of the fact that the variables at play and the scale of the demand means that the complacency sets in at all. I've already lost.
Yeah, no, I didn't think that would change much in that sense, but it's interesting to hear that ultimately, having gone there, and we know from a coaching perspective, we know from previous experience that to go there in the environment, one of the things we do with the triathlon plans for sure, and when we one-to-one coach people, is try and get them into the body of water or a similar body of water before, and that makes a huge difference to the swim psychologically, doesn't it, as an example. So getting you onto that ground, actually in the place where you will be for a brief period of time, obviously you're running through, that was 1/5 of it, give or take. It is useful. It was useful for me to look in on that, not just the logistics side, which we'll cover, but to look in on that and know that you in that environment were actually quite happy. You know, on the second day you popped out of it in really good spirits. I didn't for a moment think that the physicality of that 50k over those couple of days would test you much, if I'm honest, but getting you in that environment, we had a day of relatively crappy weather as well.
Yeah, that was a good thing. I think feeling and experiencing the weather was good, because I mean, to put it into a microcosm example, I've had a lot of exposure to horrible weather, but I haven't had as much exposure to it recently in harsher areas and environments for a while. So I'm a little bit dormant on it.
I was quite glad it was quite shady.
Yeah, me too, because it means that I mean, touch wood, it could be thunderstorms and stuff.
It could be worse, yeah.
But realistically, the weather that we had on the 2 days that we were there, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Wednesday, Thursday running, were probably as difficult psychologically and environmentally as it could get at that time of March, and it really didn't bother me.
And at that time of day, that would feel different, very different in the night if you're running through that kind of thing. But again, we've done things through the night with really harsh weather conditions, but as you say, not for a while. So you kind of need to be weathered to it.
Yeah,
I guess this is the wintering for you, isn't it? Is that becoming, for both of us in a certain sense, but certainly becoming kind of weathered by that kind of experience. But
I think what I was really, really critically reminded of with the 2 days up in Glencoe for the recce was how much resilience can go dormant, because that sort of fear I was feeling in the car before getting out and heading out into the snow for 25k on my own with loads of elevation in 1 degree Celsius.
Well, there's my follow-up question for you, cover that, so we can just frame this, is that day one, for people who weren't there, which is everybody barring you, me, Jamie, Scott and Elliot, so everybody barring Omnia, day one, you ran with Jamie through, how far did you guys cover? It was 30-something K, wasn't it?
32,
Yeah, so day one was that, but you had company. That was through some relatively crappy weather. That was pretty bad. And you will, on and off, have company purely, from my perspective, for safety on a good part of the West Highland Way. Day two, you didn't have that companionship. You were out there on your own, which, you know, for me, again, was super important to actually see how do you feel after a day being tired, after a day, and then losing that companionship on day two, which wasn't much better weather-wise, worse to start with, arguably, because visually you are hampered when there's kind of sideways snow for a bit.
Yeah,
but that cleared.
It just feels a little bit more exposed and quote unquote dangerous.
Yeah, so the difference between those 2 days, mostly the biggest difference was having somebody with you. So day two on that recce, you were exposed to a degree. We knew that there was only X amount of distance to do, but to the enormity of the task would have come to your mind more, I imagine. Oh, as you're running, correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to be thinking, well, this is all right just now, but what if I have to do this for X amount of hours and it starts to get dark? And those thoughts creep in, presumably, and you start to extrapolate out and think, what if? Did you cover that in your mind, or were you just?
No, I was mainly happy that Jamie had fucked off. To be fair, it was understandable. I had a lot more snacks available at all times.
The food was suddenly a fair amount.
Yeah. Look at him frowning. Smiling. Why? Because you stole all my snacks.
He knows where the snacks are hidden.
Snake. No, day two was. to be honest, I didn't really reflect too negatively on the enormity of what was to come too much. I think I did that more with Jamie on day one, because I think realistically, because Jamie was only doing 1 day's training and isn't actually training for this, his easy pace was a little bit, about 5 to 10%, I guess, easier in his mind for the sustainability of it than mine. So I often found my cadence maybe moving a little bit quicker, whereas day 2 I was completely in my own rhythm, which meant that I could kind of get into my own thoughts and kind of let an hour or so pass without even realizing what I was thinking about for a while.
Yeah, you found a bit of flow.
Whereas day 1 it was a bit more stop-start. We were a bit less familiar with the area. We'd started a little bit later than we'd planned and all these things. So I think it's just single stage, self-supported stuff. You want to be familiar with the area. The example I always use is the Keltman, whereby having done a recce beforehand, knowing what to expect when you get over that massive hill that's claimed your soul. If there is another massive hill waiting at the back end when you're expecting a downhill, that's going to destroy you. So just being psychologically prepared for what's around the corner is massive. And I think
Keltman's a great example, actually.
There's only 2 areas of the West Highland Way that I'm not actually familiar with, but we're going to box that off before. I'm boxing that off on the 9th and 10th. No, the 10th. The 9th I'm doing the canal. And then I'll go midweek to... fuck it. By the time I'm at Kinloch leaving, I'll be moving very slowly anyway. So I'll leave the devil's staircase can be a surprise.
Yeah.
Jazz hands.
No, you're right, though. It makes a big difference to kind of visually understand landmarks, doesn't it? If you don't know what the next landmark is, what that represents, whether that's just, whereas if you know, right, we turn this big...
Well, you can give yourself your own carrot. Rather than an accidental stick.
But seeing it and experiencing it,
you can't really do it with a map though.
Like you would know, this is the point at which. But
when you don't know whether unless you're really like facing your watch, you don't know when you're halfway up it. You don't know whether this little bit's a flat out before you go up.
And also because of the nature of what you're doing, to stop, start, and use a map and actually
it's pain in the arse,
would be irresponsible, frankly.
So to be honest, no real negatives or downsides from it. I think I'm more connected to the project now that I'm training. I've done some training in the relative environment or respective environment I should be doing it in, whereas around here on concrete in the Pentlands feels a little bit less exciting, because I think a lot of what excites me about this project is the more rural, harsher Scottishness of the environment, because a lot of my training's been done out with that. It's felt a bit monotonous and a little bit means to an end rather than end in itself as a process. And we all know that I'm very much more process than outcome driven, which means that for the past few weeks I've not necessarily felt as connected to this project as I otherwise normally would. And that's probably as a result of the fact that things are so chaotic left, right and centre. It's just difficult to prioritise without the front of mind, this experience being battered around by the elements on my own with nobody around in this beautiful part of Scotland is why I'm going to enjoy this. So having had that reminder and having a few more dates in the diary ahead of time has made the compliance and enjoyment of training and prioritization of training for me easier to map in for the next couple of weeks. But today's Wednesday, I've got 90 minutes to run and I'm going to do it out the office or at home, and I'm already finding every possible way to deprioritize that until there's no choice to do it at 8 till 9:30 tonight because it's on concrete and not exciting. So
what people don't, well, I mean, I was going to say what people don't see, and then I was going to say people don't understand, but that's unfair because lots of people will understand. But the thing that's hard to point out, and we talk about this with social media stuff, is nobody buys into social media to see the stuff that's not particularly sexy. They want to see the running, they want to see the training, they want to see the output and the suffering to a degree. But it's hard then to explain, as we know, that Omnia itself is in a place where we are working really very, very hard, and then so the amount of energy that you have to expend after a 12-hour day in the office is diminished. So you've got to stay, and this is the trick that we're trying to kind of come away with, is that you've got to stay connected to the project, because if you get even that little bit adrift, a project as big as this one, then actually becomes unmanageable, doesn't it? So it's kudos to you, mate, because I know it's a hard time, but I do know that 90 minutes then becomes easy to deprioritize. So then you've got to put in place conversations that you're having, and you've got to put in place measures, scheduling, time management that kind of refuses you any refusal.
It's I mean, I'm done in today, for example. Excuse me. Well, it's I think it's the fact that essentially I'm just at a point now where ruthless aerobic efficiency is all that's really required.
I think it's going to be important to get you back out there, as you say, 9th, 10th of March, and get you back on that track and keep you grounded in a very real psychological sense as well as that physical sense, get your feet in.
So just on that, 9th and 10th of March is going to be 50k Friday on the canal, 50k Saturday from start of the West Highland Way to about Drimmen, Rawadennen? Can't remember exactly where. Yeah. 31 miles it is, yeah. So it's to Rawadennen. 2 big days. So 100k across 2 days, back to back. Fatigue will obviously sat quite high going to the Saturday. Unfortunately, there is no real recce merit to the canal. We know that like the back of our hand.
Well, we've done it.
But it's essentially accumulating fatigue on that repetitive, demanding concrete setting ahead of a bigger day on Saturday, which means, again, that will be good psychological conditioning and familiarity with the feeling and perception of this is what it's like moving on this terrain with fatigue in your legs and your feet and everything.
Yeah.
And I just need to know what that feels like. So when I get to that point on kilometer 70 out of 250, that I can just kind of settle into that rhythm without catastrophizing that everything's going to go tits up and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Because you do find yourself getting to a point where it's like, oh, this is terrible, this is getting worse and worse, and then it just stays kind of shit.
Yeah.
And you'll have peaks and troughs within that, but it doesn't really get to the point where it's not an ever-increasing scale of ultra-endurance induced pain and suffering. You do get to a point where it's just rhythmic and carrying on. So I think the main thing with projects like this for me now is asking the question, when will I ring the bell? Because I haven't yet rung the bell on any big event. I've fallen short, don't get me wrong, but that's due to ability or miscalculation or timing or whatever it's been. I've never taken my foot off the throttle with an event and gone, you know what, I quit, I've had enough of this. And that's something I'm very proud of, even though I've had lots of very internal, very drastic internal battles along the way to get there.
You have these internal failures over and over that you then fight against, and you fall down, get up in your head a lot of times. But
so in the quest for trying to find the limit at which I choose to ring the bell, I'm scared about going on that journey, but that's kind of the entire point.
That's the point. So that's why we're there.
Yeah,
that's why we do all of these things. Any and all, I think, is that that same motivation to see where the edges are.
So I think intrinsically, I've become a little bit less connected to this project the past couple of weeks, just because everything's been done out of the front doors rather than in the environments in which I'm kind of drawn to. So I think it just goes to show that if you're training for an Ironman, training for an ultra, even a gym setting is a big one, is that if you find yourself in a monotonous place where the environment is not speaking to the training, it isn't the training or the goal itself that might be the problem. It might be the environment in which you're doing the thing. Mm-hmm. So could be a time to change a gym, could be a time to get a day pass to the powerlifting gym, could be a time to join the tri club for a session, could be a time to go up somewhere for the weekend and ride your bike there, could be time to get up at the crack of dawn so that you can drive your car to a location to run rather than run out your front door and then get in the car, whatever it needs to be. I think there's a lot of merit in choosing alternative locations to reinvigorate your connection to the goal for which you are training.
And the flip side of that same point is that there's also merit in, once again, going through the process for you, where you realize and understand and take on part of the journey is that those feelings of despondency and complacency. And so the process that we're talking about, getting into the event, starting on mile 0 and trying to get to, or kilometer 0, trying to get to kilometer 250, and will you ring the bell? Will you fail? All these kind of things. How is it going to feel? At what points is it going to be the most psychologically dark, as well as, it's all that kind of stuff. But what's easily forgotten is that also happens in the process leading up to it, doesn't it? We know that there's been points that you were able to look at it and go, this is a point at which I could just say, you know what, forget this. This is just a lot of effort. This is affecting me now psychologically and all the rest of it. So I guess as well as saying, look, there are trigger points within training to say, okay, the fix for this could be X. There's also a point within that training, certainly something this big, where the trigger point should be just triggering you to go, this is it's already tough. Can I handle the tough? If I can, I just keep going. And you're doing that very well at the moment, I think, because it's just to get through all this training, to get to the start line is the forgotten part for a lot of people, isn't it? It's not just the 250 kilometers you run. It's all the training, all the things you had to sacrifice to get to the training, all the hard, heavy days. And you can give up any point during that. And the realistic viewpoint of that, without, the objective viewpoint is that's still some fucking journey. That's still some bloody, arduous task. So as well as finding solutions for these things, there's also kind of probably an idea of saying, well, immerse in it. It's fucking horrible. It's supposed to be.
Yeah, and I mean, I can feel a headache spiking for me now. So I'm gonna lean into my current tiredness and say, what are your lessons learned from a logistical and a team management point of view as a result of our recce going into this silly event?
Well, what's the logistics? No, start that again. The logistical side of things, the management of the team, the management of you. The safety element, making sure that we're doing this whilst keeping everybody safe that's involved in it. There's a good team, because we're going to be filming it as well. We're going to make sure we've got a team that we can capture this so people can see how you got on. It's big, isn't it? We both know that it's big, and it takes a lot of planning. And the only way to plan it is the same thing that you've just been doing, is to get out there and look at it. You can do things that a lot can be done on a map if you understand how to use maps, but you can see marks on the track. You can see, whether or not, if we stand here with a camera, we're going to get blown off the top of a hill. Not a lot of that can really be fully realized until we get there. And a really simple example is that because you're on the West Highland Way, anybody who knows the geography, or anybody who doesn't, I can explain it, is that we have a road essentially going from south to north that we can drive on. And then we have a trail going from south to north that you are running on. Sometimes it hugs the road, sometimes it crosses the road, sometimes it's a mile, maybe even 2 miles away from the road. It's not that they follow the same A to B route, but they don't follow the same track. So where we can find you on that, we might have 10K where we could hold your hand, you could reach out and touch the car. But then we might have another 50K where there's only 3 entry points. And knowing where those are, how accessible those realistically are for the vehicles we're using, how useful it is to then place a cameraman in sub point 1 and sub point 2. Can we get him back out, or are we then going to have to backtrack and then race to try and get ahead of you again? And again, fundamentally, the overriding task is to make sure that we are able to provide every and all safety mechanisms we can into you and whoever might be running with you at the time. I know Jamie's going to do a fair amount. I know I'm going to jump in and do a fair amount. So we have to make sure that everybody's managed. And then there's very simple things as well in amongst that, is people will be up for 48 odd hours. There's going to be people driving cars. We need to rotate certain functions. We need to make sure that your nutrition, and this is me just skimming the top of it here for the sake of the podcast, isn't it? So when I look at that task without having first done any kind of recce, it's enormous and close to overwhelming, because, and I've done things like this for you and for others many times. So I don't think it's wrong for me to say I'm very well experienced at it, but it's still hard, and much like the physical task that you've, and the mental task that you've got ahead of you, there's a lot goes into it. There's a lot of pressure riding on me ultimately to manage those teams and make sure that we're kind of ploughing the road so that very little gets in your way. So getting together as a team, mapping that out, listening to opinions, telling 99% of those opinion makers that they're wrong, accepting the fight that comes with that, and then forging this kind of plan can't be done unless we get out there and look at the route and get out there and experience it. So boots on the ground. Over the course of the recce that we just did and the recces that we've got planned to do, I'm now vastly more confident. I think had we started it and I had to wing it, I'd like to think that somehow we could get it done, but I'd like to also say that would be fucking ridiculous, and why would you do that? But getting out there now, getting the right team around me, even spending time with those individuals in that environment, having some of them having never been in that environment before, and watching what they do under the pressure of decision making in the rain. Oh, where is it? Do I use my phone? All that kind of stuff. It's fun, very stressful, but I've come away possibly with more from the recces actually than you have. You come away boots on the ground, as we say. You've had the opportunity to get back in about it and reconnect with the environmental stuff and the the vastness of it. Whereas I have answers to very specific questions that I didn't have before, which I'm hoping, and I'm sure you'll nod along and agree with this, then lends itself very, very much to your confidence in thinking. Because if we're going into it and we're not quite sure on X, Y, and Z, then your running experience has a lot of kind of silent question marks in it, doesn't it? Is Jonny going to be there? The team, can they do this? I don't know. I wonder what's happening.
Well, day one, I was getting
all strangled each other,
frustrated with the scale of the logistics. But I think by day 2, I'd kind of just learned to, if you can just embrace the environment you're in, keep moving forwards at this sort of pacing.
Our job is to make sure
don't worry about
not
it.
your job. Yeah, your job is to manage you and to manage the very real things that you're dealing with. If you're then thinking, I wonder if whatever it might be, we could name 1,000 things there. Then I think that probably in this environment, in the way that we've divvied up this particular project, I wouldn't be doing my job right. But it's a very interesting dynamic, isn't it? Because then what I'm doing is trying to take as many questions away from you, so that you can do the job you're doing, which then provides me with more questions, which becomes cyclical. But piss poor planning and all that kind of stuff. But we're planning, we're prepped. I think we're confident. I think we've got work to do. We'll probably post up some reels and record some of it for your channel, and also a lot of what we're doing in the recce's can be kind of documented as we go, so people should be able to see it. But I'm confident now, mate. I think we're getting to a point now where we're very close, realistically, very close to kick off.
5.5 or 4 now.
5.5 weeks. 4 weeks until we taper you off, and we need to have it all boxed off.
Yeah. So, I tell you what, throughout this podcast, I've started feeling not great, and I feel awful now. So that could be a sign of current demands. But it's.
I was going to say, here is an unfolding and accurate description of what it's like to prepare for an ultra. This man across the table from me is slowly fading.
I don't feel normally as chipper as I do on these. Yeah.
When you realise he's scrubbing his own future out, I think we need to close this.
Going to keep sipping water.
Get you to your bed. Actually, we can't, because you've got fucking calls to do with me. But
I do.
There we are. We've kind of lifted the lid a little bit, shown people what's inside. It's a lot of scurrying about.
It's still very intimidating. We're just better prepared for the intimidation.
Is the word I was about to use. But because we've opened that box and had a look in, we're much more prepared for what's in it. And when we really pop the lid off, we think we'll be able to manage what comes out.
Kick Pandora's head in.
Kick Pandora. Fuck you, Pandora. Let's see.
Is Pandora in the box, or does the box belong to?
It's her box, actually, but I was going to go with it.
What's in the box? Because I now feel bad. I have no reason
you don't get to know.
to cause any damage to Pandora. It's in fact what's in her box that is at risk here.
And the fears and the potential that's beyond your capability and capacity is in the box.
You sound like you've seen the insides of this box.
I am Pandora. Reveal. This got weird.
That was disappointing. Through all these years.
After all, what a boring fucking reveal.
Anyway, that was a shit game of ping pong. We didn't do much pinging or ponging.
But I think we've covered off a lot. If anybody liked the fact that we just drivelled on about what we're doing.
That's all we really do on these, to be fair.
It was a 5-star review. Send us nice things in the post.
Don't. I get enough bloody utility bill. Oh, this has changed, that has changed. You have no action, but here's 97 things to read through to see if. Anyway,
yeah, that's a good point.
Anyway,
don't send us anything.
But the 5-star review is welcomed and encouraged, in fact. So thank you very much for listening. If you do have any more direct questions about essentially the challenges of prepping for this sort of thing, we obviously have a big wintering intake training for their 12-hour on their feet adventure. So we're talking through these things quite a lot. And a lot of what we've discussed in the recent Q&As with them very much ring true to what we've discussed today. So, as with all things, preparation is key. Realism is key. Not letting your ego get in the way is key. And as soon as complacency starts to set in, rein that in pretty quick. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble. And, get more sleep than I did last night, I think.
If you've learned anything from this podcast, it's getting sleep is important.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to keep hydrating and try and deal with this headache that this podcast has caused me. So, Jonny, I blame you. Sorry, Pandora, I blame you. You give me a headache.
I accept this.